So this morning, Disney Plus dropped episode 3 of Daredevil Born Again, and while I didn't make a video on the first 2 episodes, I wanted to dive in and talk about this 3rd episode in particular because this is a show that, honestly, I want to cover a little bit more because Daredevil, the original Netflix series, is one of my all-time favourites, so the fact that we are now getting a revival on Disney Plus, which is essentially, in a way, Season 4, I have to cover it. So as I said, I didn't do a video on the first 2 episodes of Daredevil. I just had a really busy week last week and I haven't done a video in a couple of weeks because I did have one recorded and then it went completely wrong. So I've had to sort of abandon it and start again. So I do apologise for that. But my opinion on the first 2 episodes of Born Again were really solid. I thought it was really good, really enjoyable. I think it helps the fact that I did kind of go into the show with the expectation of this isn't going to be Daredevil Season 4 in the straightforward sense, because we know from the behind the scenes of the series that this is going to be a revival in a sense, but they did have to reshoot a lot of it. We know that the show originally was going to be a reboot, that it wasn't really going to connect to the original series, and then it got reshot and redone to connect more to the original Netflix series. So going into it with that kind of expectation that, yeah, this is a continuation, but it is still kind of its own thing, I think did help. And I think those first 2 episodes, it starts with the first episode that had that really shocking opening with Foggy's death from Bullseye. Really, really shocking. I must say, I didn't really expect Foggy to die because they made such a big deal about Foggy and Karen coming back only to then write them off. Was interesting, but they are supposedly coming back for season 2 apparently, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. It was great to see Bullseye back though, like he was really awesome in that opening scene, and I hope we get a little bit more of him because he was great in season 3. I hope we see a bit more of him. The dynamic between Matt and Fisk is fantastic. I'm really loving them two back on screen together again. It's been a slow burn to get these 2 characters back together on the big screen, or at least on the small screen here. We've had cameos from Daredevil, we've had cameos from Fisk, but now we have the Daredevil show where they're back together again, and that's really, really nice to see. I think those first 2 episodes, there is like a little bit of a cooling off period, I guess, like kind of like a warming up period where the show, you can tell, is trying to kind of get into the groove, and it's trying to say, okay, let's join up with the original series, but let's also set up and establish what we're trying to do in this new series. So there is a little bit back and forth, and it's not always the smoothest of transitions, but for me personally, I really enjoyed those first 2 episodes, and I thought it was a good start for this new show. But going into episode 3, which came out today, that was an emotional gut punch of an episode. That was really, really horrifying, and I mean that in a good way. It really got a reaction out of me, which I didn't see coming. This episode really focuses on, full spoilers for episode 3 of Daredevil, this episode really focuses on the White Tiger court case, which was, a subplot in the last episode. This episode is like fully about that. We have Hector, who is now doing the trial for the murder of the 2 police officers, or the 1 police officer, and you of course have Matt trying to defend him, and then you have the other side trying to go against him. And I thought it was a really strong episode, certainly dialogue and acting wise, because this episode is purely about the court case. Like, there's no action in this really, there's no Daredevil in this episode whatsoever. Like, Matt hasn't fully returned to being Daredevil yet, so it's purely like a law show episode, and I loved that because that was such a key element of the Netflix series that I even feel like as the Netflix show went on, I feel like it sort of lessened it more and more. This kind of felt like a really solid season 1 episode of Daredevil, and I really enjoyed that. The court case, the back and forth between Matt and the defendant was really well done. I think the dialogue was excellent. The performances across the board were great. Like, Charlie Cox, he's just really seasoned at this point. Like, he knows how to do these scenes, he knows how to deliver these lines, and he does it with so much ease. And I think also the actor who played Hector in this episode, who unfortunately passed away back in 2023, I think he's been phenomenal in these 2 episodes. He's been really, really strong, really emotional. He kind of presents Hector with this level of sort of naivety, but also innocence, and it just comes across really well on the screen. So I thought this court case, that really dominates this entire episode, it felt nostalgic, but it also was just really well written and really well acted. I also found the Fisk storyline in this kind of interesting because you have Fisk, who is obviously trying to move away from the Kingpin. Like, he's not the Kingpin anymore ever since his soul was healed in Echo or whatever. He's now the mayor of New York. He's trying to be a good leader. He's trying to be a good man for the city. But he can truly never escape that kingpin inside of him. And of course, by his side, he has Vanessa, who has been running the criminal empire for years while he's been gone. And she still wants to do that. And I think this is an interesting dynamic because obviously him and Matt are very much on the same path at this point. They're both men who have these pasts, with Matt being Daredevil, Fisk being Kingpin, and they're both trying to leave it behind them, but they both have these elements in their lives and these people that kind of push them into being what they don't want to be, even though they know deep down that is who they are. I mean, when you look at the end of episode 2, when Matt beat up those 2 police officers and then screamed at the end because he realized that he had to become Daredevil in order to, stop that situation. And I think Kingpin, having this situation with Vanessa where she's using his assistance in his name to try and keep the peace amongst the criminal empire, unbeknownst to him, is, he doesn't want to not trust Vanessa, but she's putting him in that situation. And then you have like Matt in this episode who's looking at Hector, who is saying, you take away the white tiger, that's who I am. Like, that's who I am inside. And Matt knows that inside he's Daredevil, even if he's trying to escape it and he's trying to do the right thing and he's trying to help the community in other ways. He knows deep down he's still Daredevil. And I think that both of these storylines, with Matt and Fisk and these people in their lives and trying to control who they are inside, is a really interesting parallel that I think the Netflix show never really delved into, is in a way how similar these two characters are. And I like the fact that this series is taking that direction. But once Matt actually wins the court case and Hector is acquitted for these crimes, it's a real gut punch because it's such a happy moment. You hear from Hector, these things throughout the episode about how he wants to be a good person and how he only helps people. And, one day he wants to go back to this beach where he hears these frogs that have this really beautiful mating call. You really empathize with Hector. You really get on the side of him. So when you hear that he's finally acquitted of these crimes and the jury found him not guilty, it's a revelation. It's a great moment. And there's even a lovely scene, between Matt and Heather back at the apartment where they're celebrating, and there's a nice little reference to Foggy there. There's some really nice moments. But Fisk, who of course is incredibly anti-vigilante, as soon as he hears about this, he brings up the promise he made to the people of New York, which is that he's going to crack down on vigilantes. And we see him talking to Ben Urich's niece, BB Urich, who of course has had a small supporting role in this show so far. He's talking to her saying, look, vigilantes are a curse on this city, and I promised the people of New York that I was going to deal with it. And while he's saying this, a clip is being played of the White Tiger going out to do some vigilante stuff, and all of a sudden, a guy comes out of nowhere, gun to the head, shoots him point blank. White Tiger is dead. And it was just a horrible, horrific scene. Because again, I really grew to love Hector as a character. I thought he was great, and I kind of hoped that maybe White Tiger would have a bit more of a presence throughout this and be a bit more of a foil to Daredevil. But no, dead. And I think it's a really interesting, kind of commentary where Matt had to force his hand and he revealed Hector's identity to the world, against his permission to try and win this court case. And while it did win the court case, it actually put Hector's life in more danger than he already was, and it resulted in his death in the same way that Foggy died in episode 1. And I think that was just really, really sad and really heavy. And the fact that he dies and the credits roll and all the credit plays is just that noise of the ocean and the frogs mating call. It was just beautiful, like beautifully heartbreaking, but beautiful. I really, really loved that. And it just really hit me. I was really saddened by Hector's death, and I was really unfortunate that, he's not going to be on the show anymore because he was a great, great aspect to it. And of course, I just have to mention the performance from the actor whose name unfortunately escapes me. He was brilliant throughout these entire 2 episodes. Really, really strong. A true acting talent. Really sad that we had to lose him because he's really, really beautiful and great in this episode. So that death overall was just really hard hitting. But of course, the little tease at the end, which comes from Hector's death, is we see another reference to the Punisher. We see that the guy who shoots him is wearing a shirt with a Punisher logo on it. And this, of course, has been something that's been teased throughout the episodes. In episode 2, we saw the guy who had a little Punisher logo on his wrist. Also in this episode, in the court case, there was a cop who had a neck tattoo of the Punisher. And now this guy's wearing like a full-on like Punisher, like almost like vest. something that like Frank would wear traditionally. This is obviously leading into Frank appearing on the show. We know that Punisher is in this. John Bernthal is back. And I imagine that this is going to lead into a storyline that there's kind of this militia of police officers, corrupt cops who are kind of using the Punisher's logo and are using the Punisher's kind of mentality to go out there and kind of do their own vigilantism in their own way, but it's obviously just very violent and very gruesome in the way that the Punisher is. But what I love about it is I imagine that this storyline is going to go a way of Frank is going to find out about this and he's not going to be happy. We know what Frank's like. He's going to hear about this, the fact that the cops are using his symbol, using his logo in a way that is in no way connected to him. Like, I don't think the Punisher is connected to this in any way, shape, or form. I think he's just going to find out about this, go mental, and him and Matt are going to team up and take out these cops. That's how I imagine this storyline is going to go, which I must say is a really cool way to bring Frank into it. Because he's such a great character. I'm so glad he's back for this revival. I don't think the show would be complete without him. So the fact they're going to give him like a good, meaty, juicy storyline is great. And the fact it's going to potentially lead into a Punisher special presentation, which was announced earlier this week, we're getting more Punisher, and that's never a bad thing. So yeah, episode 3 of Daredevil, I really enjoyed it. It was really great. I think, honestly, this might have been my favourite episode so far. It was an emotionally charged episode that was really hard-hitting. I was glued to the screen throughout the entirety of the episode. And the fact that this was such a court case-driven episode really harkened back to like the early days of Daredevil, particularly Season 1, Season 2 on Netflix. And that's, ideally what us fans want. We want this show to, in a way, be as close to the Netflix series as possible while also doing its own thing. And I think that this episode perfectly, sums all that up. So for me, best episode of the 3 so far. Really enjoyed it. Make sure you let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. How are you feeling about Born Again so far? I know there's some very up and down opinions. Some people are really loving it. Some people think it's okay. Whatever you think, let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see more Daredevil Born Again coverage, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any more ramblings from me. And I hope to see you guys again next time.